Okay, we're on to part 4 of the chapter. We're going to start off talking about nitrogen balance. So this is a method used to determine the protein needs of an individual. If an individual is healthy and not in a period of growth, recovery, disease, then the individual needs to consume protein in the amount that replaces protein that is lost. Okay, so protein can be lost in urine, in fecal matter. We lose protein in our sweat. Protein is used to produce skin cells, which turn over, so we lose skin cells, and with that we lose protein. Protein is used to produce hair, and so that protein can't be recycled, right? That's lost. And then nails as well. So all of those are considered to be nitrogenous wastes, okay, where protein ends up in these structures, and then we lose sweat or skin cells or hair or nails or urine or feces. So again, they're waste products. And why is it nitrogenous? Because proteins are rich in nitrogen. Okay, so we lose proteins all the time, every day, right? And so we need to consume adequate amounts of protein to replace proteins being lost. Okay, if protein intake, if the amount of protein that we're ingesting and absorbing equals the amount of protein that's being lost, we are in what we say protein balance or protein equilibrium. Okay, what if that's not the case? Okay, so again, protein turnover and nitrogen balance, how much you take in versus how much you lose, they happen at the same time. Okay, so again, we have equilibrium, protein balance, and then we have negative protein or negative nitrogen balance. This is when protein intake is less than what is lost. So we're in the deficit in that case. And then we have something called positive protein balance or positive nitrogen balance. This is when protein taken in, so through our diet, is greater than what we are losing. And so we have a surplus. Okay, so we have balance, equilibrium, and then we have negative nitrogen balance where we have not enough, and then we have positive nitrogen balance where we have too much. What does this mean? When does this happen? Okay, so in the middle here, I have nitrogen balance. So again, a healthy individual, not growing, not in a disease state, okay, they're going to be in protein balance if they're taking in enough protein, which we're going to represent with nitrogen here. Again, why nitrogen? Because protein is nitrogen rich. So if we're taking in the same amount of protein or nitrogen as we are excreting, we are in balance. We are in nitrogen equilibrium. Okay, so again, who falls into this category? Healthy adults meeting protein and energy needs. Let's go over here to negative balance first. So negative nitrogen balance, again, this is going to be a situation that occurs when there is an inadequate intake of protein, and usually that results in an inadequate energy intake. Okay, so when would this happen? Individuals who are sick, right, so they're in a disease state, fevers, burns, some type of a bacterial, viral, or parasitic infection can cause this. Individuals who have negative nitrogen balance could be those who are on bed rest, so for several days, so individuals who are limited with mobility for whatever reason. Again, it could be a disease. Deficiencies of amino acids. Okay, so if an individual is taking in food, but they're taking in poor quality protein, they could end up in a negative nitrogen balance. They don't have the proper pool of amino acids to make the body's proteins. Individuals who, for whatever reason, have an increase in protein loss. So the excretion, the loss of protein is higher in these individuals. So again, some types of diseases this would hold true for. And lastly, where's my pointer? Increased secretion of certain hormones such as thyroid hormone and cortisol, okay, could lead to this negative nitrogen balance. So again, if we look up here at the patient, this looks like somebody on bed rest, maybe they have an infection. Their nitrogen intake is less than their nitrogen excretion. Okay, so the nitrogen excretion is weighing it down. Okay, so that's negative nitrogen balance. Not good. And then positive nitrogen balance. So when would you need positive nitrogen balance? Well, when individuals are growing, pregnancy, when individuals are breastfeeding, recovering after some type of an illness or injury, people who are endurance or strength training, so athletic training, that's going to result in an increase in lean muscle mass, and so you require more protein. And then individuals who are in a state where there's increased secretion of certain hormones like insulin, growth hormone, and testosterone, they're going to need more protein to be able to make those hormones. Okay, so that's going to be positive nitrogen balance. So again, nitrogen intake is greater than nitrogen excretion. Okay, so the next question is, how much protein should we eat? And that's really nuanced. It depends. It depends on an individual's activity level. Are they sedentary? Are they an endurance athlete? Are they a strength training athlete? How old is the individual? Are they growing? Are they pregnant? Are they lactating? And then health status. Individuals who are in a diseased state are going to need more protein than healthy individuals. So it really, really depends. And so again, this is a list of people who need to be in a positive protein balance. They need more protein. They need a higher level of protein to meet their needs. So again, children, adolescents that are growing, pregnant women who are growing another human inside of them, lactating women who are eating for two, and then again, athletes, endurance and strength athletes. I could add to this list, individuals who are in a disease state as well. Sometimes require more protein. Okay, so how do we calculate protein needs? So first off, the AMDR, right, for protein is between 10 and 35%. So you want to be in that range. You don't want to have under 10% of your calories coming from proteins, and you don't want to have over 35% of your calories from proteins. But this is a pretty big range. So how do we know exactly how much protein we need? So we can use the adult RDA, so the recommended daily allowance. It is set to 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Okay, and healthy body weight should be used. Okay, so again, this number here, this 0.8 grams per kilogram, is set for individuals who are not growing, who don't need to be in positive nitrogen balance. So these would be people that just need to be in equilibrium. Okay, so to use this number, notice how it's 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. In the United States, we don't measure our weight in kilograms, we measure it in pounds. So before we can use this 0.8, we have to first convert body weight from pounds to kilograms. And this is pretty easy. You're just going to take the amount of weight of the individual in pounds and divide it by 2.2. So that's always that bottom number. You're always dividing by 2.2, and that's going to give you kilograms. So let me give you an example here. Let's say we have a man, a healthy adult man, who weighs 154 pounds. Okay, so to figure out how much he weighs in kilograms, you're just going to do 154 divided by 2.2, and that's going to give you 70 kilograms. So that's this man's weight in kilograms. That's the first step to calculating protein intake. You always have to convert from pounds to kilograms. Okay, again, this 0.8 grams per kilogram does not address anyone who needs to be in positive protein balance or positive nitrogen balance. So again, anybody recovering from illness or injury, this doesn't take into account pregnant women. It doesn't take into account, people that are growing, so teens, adolescents, children. It also doesn't take into account athletes. Okay, we'll talk about that on the next page. So really the range of protein needs, it can be from 0.8 to 2 grams per kilogram. 0.8 is the RDA. So just remember that. Okay. So what about if you are an athlete? So this table here, you want to make sure that you refer to this. There's going to be some questions about this. So again, most adults fall into 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. Okay, however, if you are an endurance athlete, if you're a non-vegetarian endurance athlete, you need more than 0.8. You need from between 1.2 to 1.4 grams per kilogram of body weight per day of protein. If you are a strength trainer, non-vegetarian strength trainer, you might need a little bit more. So again, 1.2 to 1.7 grams per kilogram of body weight. And then there are special numbers for vegetarians as well. And again, these numbers again can range from about 0.8 to about 2, around there. Okay, depending again on age, physical activity, whether you're healthy or not. All of those things are going to matter. Okay, I will be asking you to use this chart in the lecture assessment packet. So you want to make sure that you pay attention to whether an individual is an athlete or not. Okay, so let's do a little bit of calculating. Let's use again that 154-pound adult male that we referred to on the couple of slides ago. Let's say that this individual is a non-athlete. So that's going to trigger you to think, okay, this person probably just needs about 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. And let's say that this individual consumes about 2,200 kilocalories per day. How many calories and grams of protein should he consume? Okay, so the first step again is to convert pounds to kilograms. Okay, so to do that again, he weighs 154 pounds, so 154 divided by 2.2. That's going to give us 70 kilograms. So there's his body weight. We would then take 70 kilograms and multiply that by the RDA, 0.8. And so we know that this individual should get about 56 grams of protein a day, okay, based on his weight, his age, and his health state, right? He's a healthy, non-athletic adult male, okay? All right, so the next question is, does this fall within the AMDRs recommended? So again, the AMDRs for healthy adults is between 10 and 35% of our calories per day. Okay, remember that protein is 4 kilocalories per gram. Okay, so we need both of those numbers. So at the low end of the AMDR, so let's say 10% of this individual's calories are going to come from protein. So we're going to take the total calories he consumes in a day. So I told you he consumes 2,200 calories in a day, and multiply that by 10%. So multiply it by 0.1. And that's going to give us 220 calories. So on the low end, this individual should be consuming 220 calories from protein. If I divide that by 4, I can get grams. Okay, so on the low end, this individual should be consuming 55 grams of protein in a day. On the high end, so 35%, again, total calories, 2,200 times 0.35 is going to give us 770. So 770 calories of the 2,200 should come from protein if he's at the high end of this. So again, divide that number by 4 to get grams, and that's going to be 193 grams of protein at the high end. So kind of the minimum and the maximum amount of protein that he should consume. Again, the RDA says 56 grams, which is at the low end. Could he consume more protein? Sure, he just doesn't want to exceed 193 grams. Okay, so it's a range. And again, we should think about activity level. It says here he's a non-athlete. So if he's not, strength training, probably not building muscle, and so therefore, doesn't need more protein. Let's go to the next slide, which kind of leads into this. So, can you eat too much protein? Yeah, you can. And Americans tend to eat more protein. Generally, you're safe, even up to 2 times the RDA. So you could take your weight in kilograms times 1.6, right, would be 2 times the RDA. And you would still fall within the AMDRs, that 10 to 35%. You don't want to exceed 35%. What if you do consume too much protein? Well, any excess protein, it doesn't get excreted from the body. It will get converted into carbohydrates and into fat, and it will be stored. The nitrogen from the protein will actually be excreted. But the carbon skeleton, the rest of the molecule besides that nitrogen, will turn into stored energy. Okay, so it will turn into either carbohydrates and become glycogen, or it will be turned into fat. Okay, so excess protein, just like any other excess of any other macromolecule, will lead to weight gain. So you really want to stay within those levels. What else? So excess protein without proper amounts of fluid can lead to dehydration, and it can lead to digestive issues like constipation. If you remember back a couple of chapters ago, there was a case study that you had, I think it was a case study or a question somewhere, about an individual who consumed a couple of protein shakes a day, and that was kind of it. And he was suffering from constipation. Okay, the question was, why do you think this individual could be suffering from constipation? So consuming too much protein and not enough other macronutrients, not enough fruits and vegetables and fiber, water, can lead to, again, dehydration and digestive issues. Okay, people with certain medical conditions like kidney problems, high protein diets can be really difficult for them. And then it also has been shown, this is nuanced, so diets that are high in protein from animal sources, so animal sources of proteins also tend to be higher in saturated fat and cholesterol. And so it's been shown that there is a link between consuming animal sources for protein and an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. Is it the actual protein that's increasing the risk, or is it just that it comes from an animal source, so it's taken in with saturated fat? Again, that's nuanced. So let's go on to 7.5. We're going to talk about digestion and absorption. Okay. So first off, if you are taking, whether it's an animal or plant, high protein food and cooking it, then the protein already starts to be digested outside the body through this method of cooking. Because remember, heat is going to cause proteins to unfold, to lose their three-dimensional shape. Remember that term, denature. Okay, so if you're cooking a protein before consuming it, then digestion actually happens outside the body because of that heat. Okay, proteins start to unfold. And then inside the mouth, of course, you have mastication, chewing. That's going to be mechanical digestion. You're breaking up that food that's rich in proteins. But chemical digestion doesn't actually start in the mouth. Instead, it starts in the stomach. Okay, so that's a little bit different than what we've seen for both carbohydrates and fats, which start in the mouth. Okay, so again, chemical digestion starts in the stomach. The cells lining the inside of your stomach are going to produce hydrochloric acid, so HCl, and that hydrochloric acid is going to create an acidic environment, which again causes proteins to denature, to unfold, to lose their three-dimensional shape. And then there is an enzyme called pepsin. So pepsin is going to be responsible for actually breaking down hydrolysis of the protein. So hydrolysis is the opposite of dehydration synthesis. Instead of building bonds, in hydrolysis we're breaking bonds. That's going to require water to do that, and an enzyme. The enzyme in this case is going to be pepsin. Okay, so pepsin is going to break the peptide bonds between amino acids, creating smaller polypeptides, maybe dipeptides, and then eventually single amino acids. So just to let you know, pepsinogen gets released by stomach cells in response to the hormone gastrin, and gastrin is produced anytime we smell food, we're thinking about food, or when you're chewing food. So this hormone will get released, and that's going to trigger the release of pepsinogen. And pepsinogen gets activated by hydrochloric acid. So it's kind of a cascade event. So we think about food, we taste food, we're chewing food, we produce gastrin as the hormone, and that hormone triggers stomach cells to release pepsinogen, and then pepsinogen gets activated by hydrochloric acid. The final form is pepsin, and again, pepsin is going to be the actual active enzyme that's going to break down the peptide bonds between amino acids. So again, that starts in the stomach. Okay? So again, protein-rich foods, fish, meat, eggs, nuts, seeds, are going to enter the stomach. Well, first of all, they get chewed up, right, in the mouth. They enter the stomach, and again, the protein is going to be partially digested by the enzyme pepsin. And again, it's going to be denatured by hydrochloric acid. And hydrochloric acid, again, activates pepsin. Okay? Food will then move from the stomach into the small intestine. And in the small intestine, the pancreas is going to secrete other enzymes, pancreatic enzymes, into the small intestine. And in the small intestine, that's where most of the digestion of protein happens. We end up with single amino acids. Okay? On the next slide, I'll talk about this more. But after digestion occurs, absorption occurs. So absorption is in the small intestine. Those amino acids will then move to the liver via the portal vein. And there, we'll talk about what happens. One of the things that can happen is those amino acids can enter the bloodstream and be delivered to all of the body cells. The large intestine, there's not much happens there. Little dietary protein ends up there. Most of it gets absorbed. And so there will be little dietary protein in fecal matter. Let's just talk a little bit more about the small intestine. So chyme, right? So remember, food in the stomach, it's turned into this soupy mixture that we call chyme. And chyme, again, is going to enter into the duodenum, the first part of that small intestine. That's going to trigger the release of a couple of hormones, secretin and cholecytokinin, CCK for short. Those will get released, okay? So those hormones get released and they stimulate the pancreas to release pancreatic proteases. So proteases are enzymes that break down proteins. There's a couple specific ones, trypsin, chymotrypsin, and carboxypeptidase. Those are the three that are released from the pancreas. And again, those are going to be responsible for further breaking down polypeptides into individual amino acids inside of the small intestine. Okay, so once we have either short chains, so tripeptides, dipeptides, or single amino acids, this process of absorption starts. And again, this is going to happen in the small intestine. The small intestine will be lined with cells that do absorption. You can see all of the villi and microvilli here. Okay, and so single amino acids will get absorbed, and they are going to, again, be transported to the liver via the portal vein. Okay, once they are in the liver, the amino acids can be used for various things. They can be used for protein synthesis in the liver. They can be transported into the bloodstream, sent to all of your body tissues, and again, be used to produce proteins. They can also be broken down for energy. That is not the best use of proteins. Okay. They can also be converted, if they're in excess, to carbohydrates or fats. And again, in this case, the amino group would come off and we would end up excreting ammonia in our urine. Okay, that happens normally, naturally. And again, lastly, they could be released into the bloodstream to be used by all of the cells in your body. Okay, so here, let's start up here. So again, amino acids can come from two sources. They can come from our diet, or they can come from breakdown of old proteins. Okay, and so we end up with an amino acid pool. And the amino acid pool in our cells can be used to synthesize other non-protein nitrogen-containing compounds. They can be used as for ketone production from carbohydrate skeletons of some amino acids. They can be used to produce glucose by this process called gluconeogenesis. They can be used to synthesize proteins for cellular structures, immune function, so like antibodies, enzymes, hormones, other essential functions. And then lastly, they can be used for energy. Again, not the best use of proteins, but they do yield 4 kilocalories per gram. Okay. Okay, and this is the end of 7.5, so I'm going to stop there. The next video will pick up with 7.6.